Welcome to Paranormal Files. I'm your host, Zoe Parker. And in today's episode, we're venturing into the uncharted realms of the human mind, where people claim to leave their bodies, travel across the world, and even communicate with the dead, all without ever leaving their room. Is it just lucid dreaming, or are we glimpsing into another dimension? Remote viewing, astral projection, and the messages they bring may be stranger and darker than we ever imagined. The roots of remote viewing and astral projection stretch back through centuries of mysticism, spiritualism, and secret research. In ancient Egypt, priests were said to leave their bodies during trance states, walking unseen through the afterlife to commune with gods and spirits. The Tibetan Book of the Dead described a dream body that could travel to other realms, separate from the physical form. Across cultures, from Native American vision quests to Hindu yogic traditions, there existed an enduring belief that consciousness could detach and roam free. These weren't always metaphorical ideas. For some practitioners, these experiences were literal, repeatable, and vital to understanding existence beyond the physical plane. The modern fascination with remote viewing began in the Cold War era, when espionage and paranoia turned scientific curiosity into state-sponsored experimentation. In the early 1970s, the United States military launched a classified program known as Project Stargate. Conducted at the Stanford Research Institute, the project explored the use of trained psychics to see distant locations or objects with nothing but the power of the mind. The goal: to spy on foreign installations, track enemy movements, and even locate hostages using extrasensory perception. The CIA, the Army, and the Defense Intelligence Agency were all involved. Reports from these experiments were baffling. Some subjects described distant rooms in detail, drawing objects and layouts they had no physical way of knowing. Others claimed to sense people or feel emotional imprints from locations thousands of miles away. While skeptics dismissed much of the data as imagination or chance, a few cases went unexplained. One viewer reportedly identified the location of a downed Soviet bomber in Africa with uncanny accuracy. Another described the interior of a Chinese nuclear facility, later confirmed by satellite. These successes were rare, but chilling enough to keep funding alive for 2 decades. Astral projection, meanwhile, existed in a parallel world of occultism, out-of-body experiences, and near-death phenomena. Unlike remote viewing, which focuses on perceiving distant targets, astral projection is the act of consciously separating the self from the body. The person often reports floating above their own form, moving through walls, visiting places both familiar and unknown. Some describe traveling through a shimmering void or encountering mysterious beings along the way. The sensation is so vivid that many believe they have touched something beyond the material world. Both practices share eerie overlaps, descriptions of the silver cord that connects the astral body to the physical, or the sudden jolt of being pulled back when danger is sensed. The boundary between observation and full immersion, between seeing and being seen, is often blurred, and in rare cases, practitioners claim contact with entities on the other side, beings that recognize them, speak to them, or try to warn them. Whether these encounters are real or figments of an overactive mind is still debated, but for those who've experienced it, the terror and wonder are undeniable. One of the earliest documented cases of what would later be called remote viewing occurred in the year 1932. A man named Ingo Swann, often credited as the father of modern remote viewing, didn't rise to prominence until decades later, but the foundations were being laid in odd stories like the case of Eileen Garrett. Garrett, a well-known psychic medium in the 1930s, was said to have seen the exact details of a dirigible disaster before it occurred. Witnesses claimed she described the mechanical failure of the R-01 airship, down to the configuration of its gas cells and the condition of its crew, days before it crashed in France. At the time, this was dismissed as coincidence, but in hindsight, many view it as one of the earliest public examples of remote information acquisition. By the early 1970s, Ingo Swann was conducting unofficial tests with researchers. In one demonstration, he allegedly influenced a magnetometer using only mental focus, prompting physicist Hal Puthoff to invite him to the Stanford Research Institute. It was here that things took a stranger turn. Swan claimed not only to sense hidden objects in nearby rooms, but also to describe the surface of Jupiter, years before NASA's Pioneer 10 probe confirmed his details. He spoke of gaseous bands, rings like Saturn, and a magnetic field larger than scientists had expected. While it's impossible to know whether this was true perception or educated guesswork, the accuracy stunned even skeptical observers. Around the same time, stories of astral projection were appearing in unexpected places. In 1971, Robert Monroe published a book called Journeys Out of the Body, chronicling his spontaneous episodes of disconnection from the physical form. He would awaken at night to find himself floating, drifting through his house, sometimes seeing his own sleeping body from above. These episodes grew more vivid, more frequent. Eventually, Monroe claimed to travel to other realms, dimensions populated by strange entities, vast cities of light and shadows that tried to follow him back. Others began to share similar tales. A woman in Michigan said she projected during a hospital stay and saw her husband crying in the waiting room. Information confirmed later when she described the blue sweater he was wearing, which she hadn't seen. In Arizona, a young boy reportedly described places he had never visited, down to the number of windows in a locked guest room. In all these cases, what bound the stories together was their consistency. Across cultures, ages, and belief systems, the details aligned in uncanny ways. These accounts were often dismissed as dreams, hallucinations, or exaggerations, but the emotional reactions of those who experienced them suggested otherwise. Many returned with profound shifts in worldview. Some reported anxiety, depression, or insomnia after these episodes. Others felt awe or claimed to gain knowledge they couldn't explain. Whether seen as spiritual awakenings or delusions, the impact was always real. And as more of these stories surfaced, the line between mental projection and physical experience became increasingly difficult to define. By the mid-1970s, the United States government had moved beyond casual interest and was now funding large-scale research into remote viewing under classified programs. Project Stargate, overseen initially by the CIA and later by the Defense Intelligence Agency, recruited civilians and military personnel alike. They were trained in structured protocols designed to eliminate guesswork and hone the ability to see distant targets. The sessions were often simple: a sealed envelope containing coordinates or photos, and a subject asked to sketch or describe what came to mind. The results were anything but simple. One of the most astonishing cases involved a viewer named Joe McMoneagle, a retired Army intelligence officer. In one session, McMoneagle was given only the coordinates of a secret Soviet installation. Without knowing anything else, he described a massive crane, a dry dock, and a submarine that matched specifications of a vessel not yet publicly known. The CIA quietly confirmed the site through satellite images, and the Pentagon began to take these abilities more seriously. In another session, he viewed a Chinese nuclear facility and correctly identified the presence of high radiation, unusual ventilation systems, and protective gear worn by workers. The training manuals for remote viewing read more like meditation guides than military protocols. Trainees were taught to empty the mind, let impressions flow without judgment, and avoid interpreting what they saw. Instead, they were told to sketch, to feel, to report colors, temperatures, and emotional impressions. The belief was that raw sensory data was more accurate than logic. Remote viewers spoke of flashes of light, intense vibrations, and moments of disorientation when their awareness seemed to lock onto something thousands of miles away. Meanwhile, research into astral projection remained mostly outside the government sphere until the Monroe Institute entered the picture. Founded by Robert Monroe after his own experiences, the Institute developed hemi-sync technology, audio patterns designed to induce altered states of consciousness. Subjects would lie in soundproof rooms wearing headphones, listening to synchronized tones that encouraged the brain to enter the theta state, a frequency linked to deep meditation and out-of-body experiences. Some participants reported immediate results. Others took weeks or months. But again and again, people claimed to exit their bodies, view themselves from above, and travel to unknown locations. The Institute documented thousands of pages of anecdotal evidence, including reports of communication with non-physical entities. Some of these were described as friendly guides. Others were not. Skeptics tried to replicate the results using placebo controls, but the subjective nature of the experience made it hard to verify. Still, neurologists began to take notice. Brain scans showed unusual patterns during reported projections, anomalous synchronization between left and right hemispheres, spikes in unusual frequency bands, and sudden bursts of activity in the temporal lobe. These were not standard dream states. Something strange was happening. While no physical proof could confirm that anyone had truly left their body or peered across the world with their mind, the consistency of the claims and the intensity of the experiences could not be ignored. The researchers may not have known what they were observing, but they knew it was real to those who experienced it. And in several cases, those experiences would turn dark. As the documented experiences of remote viewing and astral projection expanded, theories began to form, some grounded in spiritual traditions, others rooted in quantum physics, and a few that ventured into far stranger territory. For believers, astral projection was not merely a psychological anomaly or vivid dream. It was a deliberate detachment of the soul from the body, a metaphysical act made possible by our inherent spiritual nature. Many describe the astral realm as a layered reality, one composed of multiple dimensions that exist alongside our physical world, accessible through heightened consciousness. According to this framework, each layer of the astral plane houses different forms of existence. The lower levels are said to be dense and shadowy, populated by lost souls, parasitic entities, and echoes of the recently deceased. Higher levels are more vibrant and fluid, described as realms of light, love, or pure knowledge. Practitioners often warn that the journey depends on the traveler's intention and emotional state. Fear or anger can attract dark energies. Calmness and curiosity invite clarity. In remote viewing circles, the theories often took a more structured tone. Some researchers propose that consciousness behaves like a quantum field, non-local, unaffected by distance, and capable of accessing information through entanglement. Others believed that the human brain could act as a receiver, much like a radio, tuning into subtle frequencies or alternate dimensions where information exists outside linear time. This might explain why some remote viewers reported seeing events that hadn't happened yet, or glimpsing scenes from the distant past. One of the more controversial ideas came from within the Monroe Institute. A few practitioners claimed that during deep astral projection sessions, they encountered intelligences not just from other realms, but from entirely different forms of existence. These entities communicated without language, sometimes through symbols, emotions, or direct knowledge transfer. The messages were often cryptic, warnings about technological imbalance, insights about the soul's journey, or urgent suggestions that humanity was not alone in the universe. Skeptics argue these experiences are the result of hypnagogic hallucinations, dreamlike states caused by sleep paralysis, oxygen deprivation, or brain chemistry. Some neuroscientists believe these out-of-body journeys are the result of the brain's attempt to create spatial awareness when deprived of external input. In other words, it might just be the mind simulating movement through imagined space. But skeptics have difficulty explaining one critical aspect: shared experiences. There are documented cases of two individuals practicing independently, describing the same events, objects, or locations without prior knowledge or contact. In one case, a pair of trained viewers reportedly described the same abandoned warehouse down to the specific graffiti on the walls, despite never having been there, and living in different countries. Another example involves a woman who claimed to visit her friend during an astral projection session, later confirming details about the room, the color of his blanket, and the conversation he was having on the phone. Whether these alignments are extraordinary coincidences or something more remains unresolved. What continues to disturb both believers and skeptics alike is the occasional report that during these experiences, something sees them back. Something aware, intelligent, and not always welcoming. In the digital age, remote viewing and astral projection have not faded into obscurity. They've taken on new forms and audiences. Online forums, social media platforms, and dedicated communities now host thousands of stories from people claiming to explore the astral realm nightly or participate in collective remote viewing experiments. Reddit threads recount eerily similar visions from strangers across the world. TikTok users film themselves mid-session, claiming to re-enter their bodies on camera, breathless and shaken. YouTube channels showcase detailed walkthroughs of how to initiate astral travel, often pairing spiritual advice with modern techniques like sensory deprivation, guided hypnosis, and binaural beats. What was once the domain of classified military operations and obscure spiritual texts is now part of pop culture. But beneath the surface, the phenomenon is growing darker. Some users have reported increasingly disturbing encounters, beings that appear without warning, rooms that change into nightmares, or sudden feelings of paralysis and dread. One viral story describes a man who, after years of peaceful astral exploration, found himself trapped in what he called a false home. He believed he had returned to his body, only to realize that the people around him were imposters, silent, unblinking, and staring at him without emotion. He eventually woke, screaming, only to find deep scratch marks on his chest. Other reports speak of astral parasites, entities that attach themselves to travelers, feeding off their energy. These beings are rarely described in detail, often taking on shadowy or amorphous forms. A woman in Texas claimed she encountered one during an extended session and awoke with unexplained bruises. She later reported vivid nightmares and what she called emotional bleed, intense mood swings and intrusive thoughts that didn't feel like her own. Paranormal researchers have begun documenting these trends, noting that the number of negative experiences seems to increase among untrained or reckless practitioners. Meanwhile, the concept of remote viewing has found a foothold in surprising new circles: cryptocurrency markets, sports betting, and even crime solving. There are YouTube psychics who claim to see future coin fluctuations, using remote viewing protocols to predict market surges or crashes. In some cold case communities, volunteers attempt to view the locations of missing persons or describe events from decades past. In a few instances, tips based on remote viewing have been submitted to law enforcement, sometimes matching known facts, though not enough for legal admissibility. The Monroe Institute continues its research, now integrating modern neuroscience, heart rate variability, and biometric feedback. While mainstream science still largely dismisses these practices, a growing number of labs are exploring altered states of consciousness. The CIA quietly declassified hundreds of remote viewing documents in the early 2000s, revealing strange details that have only fueled public curiosity. In recent years, there's been an uptick in coordinated group projection events, participants agreeing to meet at a designated place in the astral realm, often described as a vast library, a mountain, or a glowing temple. While results vary, some claim they've interacted with others during these sessions, verifying conversations, clothing, or symbols afterward. A few of these experiments have been documented by journalists, though reproducibility remains elusive. Still, the reports keep coming. More people than ever believe they are connecting with something outside themselves, something ancient, intelligent, and watching. And as access grows and technology evolves, the boundaries between consciousness, space, and the unknown seem to be thinning. The psychological and cultural impact of remote viewing and astral projection cannot be measured in lab reports or case files alone. These experiences, whether real or imagined, have reshaped the lives of those who undergo them. In interviews with longtime practitioners, a recurring theme emerges. Once someone has experienced what they believe is a true separation of consciousness from the body, their worldview rarely returns to what it was. For some, this transformation is empowering, granting a profound sense of spiritual purpose. For others, it opens a door that never fully closes, inviting lingering questions, unexplained fears, and a sense of being watched even in waking life. Therapists and psychologists who work with individuals reporting out-of-body experiences often tread carefully. While many experiences align with dissociative states or lucid dreaming, others defy easy classification. Patients describe seeing family members at a distance, knowing the contents of closed rooms, or encountering entities that leave emotional scars. A few have experienced severe anxiety, fearing they won't return from an astral journey, or reporting sensations of being followed back into waking consciousness. These symptoms mirror trauma responses, but without a clear origin. In some cultures, these experiences are not viewed as abnormal. In parts of South America, shamanic traditions openly embrace out-of-body travel as part of spiritual practice. In West Africa, the Yoruba religion speaks of the eerie, a higher self that can travel independently of the body. In Tibetan Buddhism, advanced monks engage in dream yoga, learning to remain conscious during sleep and explore the dreamscape as a form of spiritual training. These cultures view the phenomenon not as a break from reality, but as a deeper layer of it. In Western culture, however, the mainstream perception remains divided. Popular media has shaped the narrative through horror films, science fiction, and ghost stories. Astral projection is often portrayed as dangerous or demonic, a way for spirits to invade the body or lure the traveler into otherworldly traps. Remote viewing, in contrast, has taken on a more clinical, even conspiratorial tone, with stories of government cover-ups and psychic spies still captivating audiences. This dichotomy, spiritual gift or dangerous game, continues to influence how society responds to those who claim these abilities. Communities built around these phenomena offer both comfort and complication. Online forums provide space for shared experiences and guidance, but they also amplify fear. Stories of failed returns, hostile entities, or accidental possession spread quickly, blending myth with memory. For the deeply involved, there's often a sense of isolation. Friends and family may dismiss their claims or label them as mentally unwell. In extreme cases, individuals abandon careers or relationships, feeling called to pursue their experiences more fully, regardless of cost. Despite the personal risks, many continue to seek out these altered states. They describe a longing, a pull, as though something just beyond perception is calling them. Whether that call leads to discovery or delusion is a question without a clear answer. What's certain is that those who've glimpsed these hidden realms are forever changed by them, carrying memories of places they cannot map, voices they cannot name, and truths they may never fully understand. As the accounts accumulate, certain themes recur like echoes through a vast and silent chamber. While the names, dates, and cultures vary, the essence of the experiences remains remarkably consistent. In both remote viewing and astral projection, participants often describe an initial moment of detachment, an unmistakable sensation of pulling away from the physical body. It is not always smooth. Some report an electric buzzing, others a sudden drop, as if falling through themselves. Then comes the silence, the stillness, and the realization that something fundamental has shifted. Descriptions of movement through space rarely involve walking or flying. Instead, travelers speak of blinking into new locations, arriving suddenly and without transition. In remote viewing, this sensation is more mental, an impression, a knowing, a snapshot that unfolds slowly with focus. In astral projection, the experience is vivid and embodied, with travelers reporting full sensory engagement. The walls of distant rooms, the smell of forests they have never seen, even the emotional residue of people they encounter, all feel strikingly real. One former intelligence officer described a session where he attempted to view a missile silo buried deep beneath the earth. As he focused, he claimed to feel a weightless descent, followed by intense pressure and the eerie sensation of being watched by something non-human. Another participant in a civilian group reported projecting to a monastery she had never visited, later identifying artwork and layouts verified by photographs. She claimed that a monk within the vision turned and looked at her, smiled, and simply said, "We've been waiting." Encounters with entities appear again and again. Some seem indifferent, others helpful, a few overtly hostile. A man from Norway recounted an astral journey where he entered what he believed was a library of souls. The room extended endlessly, filled with glowing orbs and whispering voices. As he reached out to touch one, he said a shadowy figure emerged from the darkness and physically pushed him out. He awoke vomiting, his body freezing despite the warm room around him. Remote viewers have also reported strange disruptions, sessions where the signal suddenly goes dark, locations they are unable to penetrate. feelings of dread or nausea when attempting to focus on certain coordinates. Some believe these are signs of psychic interference. Others fear they are encountering something intentionally concealed. These stories, taken individually, are unsettling curiosities. Taken together, they form a mosaic of unexplained detail. The same symbols, the same beings, the same emotional imprints described by people who have never met, in places they've never seen. A network of perception just beneath the surface of normal reality, accessible only to those who know how to look, or drift. What remains unresolved is the origin of this realm. Is it a shared psychic space, an interdimensional plane, or a projection of the subconscious mind? The consistent patterns argue against coincidence, yet no map exists, no coordinates that can be cross-verified by science. The evidence is internal, but no less vivid for being so. These shared echoes, these untraceable commonalities, are perhaps the strongest indication that whatever lies beyond the boundary of waking life is not only real, it's aware. If these experiences are more than hallucinations, then the implications are staggering. What if human consciousness is not bound by the body, not even by space or time? What if we are vessels for something far greater, something that can reach across dimensions, into realms that defy physics and explanation? The idea that the mind might travel, observe, interact, or be acted upon from the outside pushes the limits of what we consider possible. And yet, that is precisely what thousands of accounts suggest. Suppose remote viewing is tapping into a collective field of information, a kind of psychic internet accessible by trained minds. That would mean every place, every person, every moment is encoded in a vast non-physical matrix, and that our minds, under certain conditions, can tune into it. Not unlike a shortwave radio scanning across frequencies, finding fragments of distant conversations, images, or events. That might explain the sudden visions, the flashes of places never seen, the accurate sketches of foreign rooms. It might also explain the eerie overlap in descriptions of locations never visited, as if consciousness is retrieving data from a centralized source beyond the individual self. Now imagine astral projection is not simply a hallucinated experience, but a literal separation of consciousness. A traveler steps out, leaves the biological shell behind, and roams a parallel space, one filled with layers of reality, hidden intelligences, and dangers. If that's true, then what protects the body while the mind is away? Are there rules we don't understand? Boundaries that once crossed cannot be uncrossed? Some practitioners believe that certain locations are off-limits, not because of physical inaccessibility, but because of guardians, entities that restrict entry, chase intruders, or mark them. Others speak of being pulled into landscapes too structured, too intentional to be dismissed as dreams. Places where the architecture seems built, not imagined. There are also those who believe that this realm is not neutral, that there are watchers, beings of uncertain motive, who observe those who wander too far. Some report being warned not to return. Others claim to have seen their own names or images or echoes of their pasts, stored in places that felt archival, deliberate, and very old. It raises the question, are we the explorers, or are we being studied? What if remote viewers and astral travelers are not just accessing information, but triggering something on the other side? What if perception itself becomes a kind of signal, a flare in a dark sky that alerts something else? This could explain the occasional sudden hostility, the abrupt end to a session, or the disturbing sensation that the watcher has become the watched. And what if some of these entities are not indifferent observers, but recruiters? Or worse, predators? Across thousands of stories, a quiet pattern emerges of people who go too deep, who vanish from communities, retreat from reality, and never quite return the same. It's possible they found something, or perhaps something found them. There is no single theory that can fully explain the strange intersection of remote viewing, astral projection, and the persistent belief that something, or someone, is waiting beyond the veil. Despite countless attempts to categorize, debunk, or scientifically map these experiences, the core mystery remains untouched. For every skeptic armed with neurological models and psychological theories, there is a practitioner who brings back details that cannot be dismissed. For every claim of dreamlike confusion, There's a report of crisp, undeniable clarity, a knowing that cannot be undone. Some see these experiences as a glimpse of our true nature, that we are more than bodies, more than brains, that consciousness is an explorer, and the physical world is only a sliver of the territory it was meant to roam. These people describe their projections not with fear, but with reverence, portraying the astral as a kind of sacred landscape, rich with meaning, history, and beings who guide more than they threaten. Others remain haunted. They speak of missing time, sleep disturbances, and a growing sense of unease. Some say they still hear the voices long after the sessions end. A few refuse to speak of what they saw, claiming the memories feel implanted or not entirely their own. In these darker corners, the line between spiritual awakening and psychic invasion begins to blur. The lingering question is this: if consciousness can travel, what else can travel with it? Can we bring something back? Or can something follow? If even a fraction of these stories are true, we may be surrounded by more than we can see, intersected by unseen currents of awareness, memory, and intelligence. Perhaps the physical world is only the shallowest end of a vast and unfathomable ocean. The files on Project Stargate have been declassified. The books on astral travel have been published. The stories continue to be told, yet we remain no closer to certainty, only deeper into the mystery. Whether these are spiritual journeys, psychological delusions, or encounters with something beyond comprehension, they have left a permanent mark on those who dare to explore. Thanks for listening. This has been Paranormal Files. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you'd like to support the show, subscribe to the Forbidden Knowledge Network on Patreon. Subscribe now.